She was nicknamed by her fellow fighters and her own husband, the recently Field Marshal Kimathi, as the wasp. Fell small, fast, and ready to sting. It is the story of Mama Mukami Kimathi, one of the Mau Mau fighters and veterans in Kenya. Many times her story is told from her husband's perspective, the legendary Field Marshal Kimathi. However, behind the great story of Kimathi as a renowned Mau Mau leader lies a story of Mukami Kimathi. In the Women Warriors of Africa's Independence, the CSTV brings you her story. Who was Mukami Kimathi? Where was she born? How did she enter the Mau Mau War of Independence? And more importantly, what was her role in the Mau Mau War of Independence? And today, where is Mama Mukami Kimathi? Stay tuned and have this discussion raw and real. Welcome back. When the story of Mau Mau War of Independence in Kenya is told, one common name that you will not miss is the name Field Marshal Kimathi, one of the Mau Mau leaders. Many times when his story is told, Kimathi is presented as the greatest hero that Kenya ever had. And sometimes in telling his story, the name Mukami Kimathi features in one way or another. However, this name only features more as Mukami Kimathi as the widow to the Field Marshal, the late Field Marshal Kimathi. Very little is actually told about Mukami Kimathi as a fighter in Mau Mau, and not only as a wife to Kimathi. For us to understand who was Muthoni Kimathi, then we need to go back to history. She was born in 1930 in a polygamous family. Her mother was Waseke and her father Wangombe. Mukami Kimathi was the second born of the 4 siblings that the mother had with the father. The father was very violent and worked in the Setra farms. Remember when the British came to Kenya, they established white Setra farms. So his father worked there, and he was also very violent. Is one father who used to beat the mother and the children. As a young girl, Mukami tended her father's goats. And while doing all this, growing up during the colonial time, born in 1930s, this is the time that actually the colonial political economy had really taken root in the country. So she was able to experience colonial brutality. She saw it, she witnessed it, she experienced it. First, she saw their neighbors' land being grabbed and being rewarded to the colonial bodyguards or the colonial village guards. Those who decided to support the colonial administrators sometimes could be given land, and this land was just grabbed from the masses. So Mukami's neighbor had fallen a victim of the same. Secondly, Mukami's father used to tell them that they had been born in servitude, in slavery, because of how the situation was at that particular time. Working as forced laborers in white settler farms was nothing but slavery. And Mukami had seen the father do this since he grew up. She grew up. Another thing that Mukami came actually into contact with to understand the brutality of the colonial administration was the Kipande system. Mukami first saw the pass, or the Kipande, as it was called, with his father. And this Kipande was the one that was supposed to first control the mobility, and second to ensure that the Africans offered their free labor in the white central farms. It's also important to note that Mukami's father actually never wanted Mukami to go to school. But at the age of 14, Mukami defied. A very strong gesture of the strong woman Mukami was to grow, one who made independent decisions and chose what she felt was good for her. So defying her father's wishes not to go to school at the age of 14 for an African girl at that particular time shows you how strong-minded and self-minded Mukami was. However, it is important to note that the mother supported her in this move. So, although she joined school and although she used to perform, her father used to flog her a lot about this, about her decision to go to school, but she never gave up. She was only to drop out of school 4 years later, not because actually of the father's flogging, but because of lack of school fees. Again, where she went to study is where she met with Dedan Kimathi. Dedan Kimathi was the teacher where Mukami Kimathi was studying. And it is here that Mukami Kimathi came one-on-one with this World War II ex-soldier and the greatest Mau Mau leader, Field Marshal Dedan Kimathi. And it is here that Dedan Kimathi spotted Mukami and few years later came to woo her hand in marriage. When Dedan Kimathi came to woo Mukami Kimathi's hand in marriage, the father was not receptive about it. Why? The father knew Dedan Kimathi as a leader of Mau Mau, a group that already had been banned during the colonial administration in Kenya. The father never wanted trouble, already had seen trouble working in the white central farms. Secondly, in her autobiography, Mukami says that the father also didn't like Dedan Kimathi because Dedan Kimathi came from somehow a poor family compared to Mukami Kimathi's family. So there was also an aspect that had to do with class and wealth. But after several pleas, the father finally accepted for the two to marry each other. And as a result, they got married and did a traditional Kikuyu wedding. How did then Mukami join the Mau Mau War of Independence? Mukami Kimathi joined the Mau Mau War of Independence after marriage to Dedan Kimathi. Together with her husband, they used to do oathing and recruitment and mobilization of people to join the Mau Mau War of Independence to fight against the British administration in the country. So Mukami and their husband openly did oathing and recruitment. And they only ran into the forest in 1953 when the husband became most wanted. And they stayed in the forest until Mukami was pregnant. And she left the forest alone, not with the husband. She left the forest alone because she was pregnant. However, she didn't reach her destination. She wanted to go to Nairobi because the husband had instructed Waiyaki Wamboi Otieno, at that particular time an urban fighter also, to ensure that Mukami Kimathi reaches safely where she was supposed to be taken. However, on the way, they were arrested. The reason for arrest is that Mukami didn't have a pass, they did not have the kipande. So she was arrested and detained in Rangata and Krikiti prisons. Even inside the prisons, Mukami still continued to motivate the women who had been arrested because of Momo activities to continue with the Momo spirit. At some point, she escaped the prison with the help of a guard called Gatiba. Gatiba used to see mercy on Mukami because the young child that Mukami had now after giving birth used to cry the whole night. So he felt like it was time that he helped this woman run out of the prison. So he purposely left the prison doors open for Mukami actually to run away. But she was shortly rearrested and taken to Rangata prisons, where she spent 8 months. Mukami was only released from prison in 1957. And the reasons of her release was because finally the husband has been captured and had been assassinated, all had been killed. However, she had a chance to meet the husband 2 hours before he was executed. One could wonder what was Mukami's role in the forest as a fighter and also in the village as a Mau Mau fighter. First, Mukami was very, very instrumental in the recruitment of people into Mau Mau. She also did a lot of oathing for the Mau Mau members. Remember, oathing was very important in terms of binding members into Mau Mau and to ensure that they do not betray the Mau Mau group. She was also responsible for food supplies before she entered into the forest, and she also organized tribal dances. And in these tribal dances, she was able to mobilize and motivate people to join the Mau Mau War of Independence. In the forest, she organized a daring band of women who actually were responsible for spying, supply of weapons, resource mobilization, and supply of food. So she was not just in the forest hiding, no. She was in the forest fighting alongside other fighters. And this fighting was not necessarily combatant fighting. Non-combatant fighting was very, very important, and Mukami was one of those non-combatant fighters in the forest. It is also important to know that Mukami was the only person who could be able to critique Field Marshal Kimathi without fear. Dedan Kimathi was one of the feared field marshals, all Mau Mau leaders. And Mukami Kimathi, being the wife, used her power, the subtle power of a woman, to critique Dedan Kimathi whenever she saw that he is making a wrong decision. It is because of these constant critics and trying to correct the husband that she was called the wasp. She was very small, fell fast, and quick to sting. She wasn't afraid that the fiancé, the fire's legendary field marshal Dedan Kimathi, could actually reprimand her. She always stood there to tell him the truth. So, when she was released from prison in 1957, Mukami Kimathi came out more poorer than even she entered the forest. She came out without a husband, without land, and at that particular time, Mau Mau had been greatly banned. And the ban was only to be lifted several years later in 2003. So he came out of the prison virtually with nothing, totally nothing. And she started to do farming, potato farming in Kinangop, Nyandarua County. She joined the Heroes Church also, and where she spoke much about the women fighters in Mau Mau. And today she has the Mukami Kimathi Foundation, a foundation that she uses not only to give back to the society, but as a standing legacy of her role in Mau Mau as a fighter, and not only as the wife to Dedan Kimathi, the field marshal and the leader of Mau Mau. So that is the story of Mukami Kimathi, one of the Mau Mau fighters in Kenya. So next time, don't see Mukami Kimathi as only a widow to a Mau Mau fighter, because she was also a Mau Mau fighter. Stay tuned and see you next time. Remember to subscribe.